Michigan Liberation is a statewide network of people and organizations organizing to end the criminalization of Black families and communities of color in Michigan. We envision a state without mass incarceration, mass policing, and punishment. We envision a state with the best public education in the nation, single-payer health care, and thriving Black and Brown communities. Here on the Respect the Rules podcast, we will lift up the stories and experiences of those impacted by mass incarceration, collective ties to the criminal legal system, and the frontline efforts to end mass incarceration.
What's up, everybody? It's Miss Marjon. And as you know, last month we did mental health awareness. And we're going to continue it because we know mental health is still present. I'm going to bring on my guest, but before I do, I got to read a little bit about their bio. I'm going to be interviewing Beth Bailey and Lance Hicks from the Detroit Peer Respite. Detroit Peer Respite is a collective of abolitionist care workers. You know, we love that word there, abolitionists, here at Michigan Liberation, all right? But they're coming from around the city of Detroit, all right? What up, though? Most of us are trans, they're queer women and femmes. Some, but not all of us, have job experience in the mental health or professional professions, or medical professions, should I say. But respite is not a medical or professional offering. It's a form of mutual aid. We all have lived experience of surviving our own personal struggles. So that is straight from their bio. So with further ado, I want to go ahead and bring on Beth and Lance. What is going on, Beth and Lance? I just had to read your bio and everything from Detroit Peer Respite. What's going on, you two?
Hey, Ms. Marjon. Doing okay? How are you?
Oh, fine. Thank you so much for coming on. And like I said, last month we dealt with May mental health awareness, and we're continuing it over into June and everything. And so with that, I want to go straight into, mental health awareness with Detroit Peer Respite, and everything. I tried to do the best with your bio, but I know you guys can tell your bio better than anybody. Did I leave anything out, from the bio and everything that you want everybody to know about your collective? First of all, what is a collective? Let's start there, because some people have no doggone clue what a collective is, especially as it deals with abolition, work and stuff, or being an abolitionist.
I mean, so thanks for inviting us. And I don't want to define it for everybody, but I think as a group, what we're understanding it for ourselves to mean is just like that it's a project that we're all kind of like sharing responsibility for, both like launching it and also like kind of evaluating how well it's working, holding accountability in the event that harm happens, which we assume is a question of when and not if with this type of work. And doing that in a way where responsibility and also decision-making authority are a shared practice. Like, I think that's how we've been understanding it. Does that feel accurate, Beth?
Yeah, I think for me, the collective really speaks to the fact that like everyone is valued and everyone's contribution is valued, where we're collecting the ideas and the so rather than having an individual who's in charge and makes the decisions, and then they have like delegated instructions to people down below, it's collectively held. That leadership is collectively held as well. And so we're all coming to it with a different perspective. We're all coming to it with lived experiences. And we're all coming to it knowing that our contribution has value to the larger group.
Okay. Well, thank you both for that. I know I put you on the spot on that, but I knew you were going to do amazing with everything. But first of all, Beth, I want to talk about your educator, organizer, artist, gardener, everything, right? Okay. All right. But hey, let's talk about mental health. And you said mad justice. All right. Mm-hmm. Personal connection to mental health and mad justice. Okay. You started organizing with Detroit Peer Respite back, in 22, right? Summer 22?
Sounds right.
Okay.
Around that.
You said that's a story and I'm sticking to it, right? And then Lance, of course. Okay, Lance, you got to break this down. Queer, trans, femme, mixed Black organizer. But I love the fact that in your bio, you talk about trauma. You have some experience dealing with, you're a trauma therapist born and raised in Detroit. What up, Doe? And everything. So please, did I leave anything out? You've been, hey, you don't look like what you've been through, but you know what I mean? I've seen this. You've homeless youth support, racial justice. Let me tell you, the reason why I say you don't look like what you've been through. Both of you know this work can tire you out. You know what I mean? But
It can,
it's a
but I
passion.
think it's different for everybody because I think that like I was always expecting it to be an exhausting process. And I do hear like in communities talking about care work, there's a big conversation about how, rest is resistance and we need to, care for ourselves in order to be equipped to care for others in our community. And this is not something I disagree with per se, or something that I take issue with, but I don't always feel a personal connection to these ideas because like I do feel like it's resourcing for me to be engaged with this. And I do feel that actually part of why it was such a priority for me to initially, because I was one of the initial people that kind of called together our group of like trying to get this going. And that was in spring of 22. But prior to that happening, we had tried to launch a peer respite several times, over the years. For the past decade, had been talking to people, getting conversations going. And what I realized is like we were talking to a lot of people who were ideologically aligned and politically aligned, but it did feel draining for them. And like at this time, everybody is beyond capacity with just their basic survival in terms of movement workers. And so there were a lot of people who were supportive philosophically that said they didn't have capacity. And when we started the project, I was actually a couple months out of a very bad inpatient stay at Havenwick. And a lot of the people that were on my care pod, which is like my community care team that I had used for a long time, kind of advised me to wait on starting peer respite. And they were like, Lance, like maybe you should like take care of yourself first. Like you've been through a lot. And what I was trying to explain was like my self-care is building this project. Like this is actually a thing that is adding resources to me and not depleting me in any way at this time. So that feels good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Lance.
If I can kind of, I guess, piggyback off of that, I came into organizing through really the 2020 abolition movement, police and prison abolition movement that really gained steam around the George Floyd uprisings. And so much of the work that I was doing was about tearing down, abolishing systems, tearing down systems. And I found that that was really draining for me, where, I'm constantly fighting against something. And what I found with the organizing work in Detroit Peer Respite was the opportunity to fight for something, to build towards something. And that's a different type of energy. It's a different type of community building too, because you're finding connections, not just through, and we have this shared distaste for this thing, but we have this shared love, right? Like we have this shared love that we come together around. And I'll say that like organizing with the peer respite has been one of the most restorative experiences that I've had, because we really take the time to figure out, or to like recognize, like if someone who experiences a mental health crisis can't be organizing with us, if we set ourselves up in a way that someone who experiences mental health crises can't be an active organizer with us, then we're setting up the wrong organization. We are for and of the same people, right? Like we're not coming down from on high and serving folks who need
Right.
us. It's not that type of charity model. It is truly mutual aid. It's truly, our hope is that as our guests reach a point that they might be able to plug in to the peer respite and become a peer support worker, or be part of the collective in other ways.
Okay. And with that, I want to dig straight into decarcerating mental health care. Because I know now we know exactly, you guys are a bunch of peers that are coming together for a common cause. What do you mean by decarcerating mental health care? Let's now in Michigan Liberation, we do use the word decarceration, and we get asked all the time, what the heck does that mean? You know what I mean? So I want you both to tell me how it pertains to mental health care, though. You know what I'm saying? So, and I'll chime in later. Lance and Beth.
I mean, speaking for myself, like, so I am a therapist, like by profession at this point. But feels like a recent development. I guess not that recent, 2017. I like officially got my MSW, but um, for me, like, first of all, I kind of became a therapist by accident, like actually. No, seriously, like I meant to go to social work school, but I did not intend to become a therapist. And the reason I didn't intend to become a therapist was frankly because after like a long lifetime of mental health problems myself, including a lot of trauma, by the time I got to grad school, I probably already had 30 therapists in my life, like as a client. Um, and I did not find therapy to be a helpful thing, out of personal experience. Like, I actually thought it was a waste of time and money. I thought that it was a way to surveil and control and harm vulnerable people, including myself. Like, that was my relationship to what therapy was when I proceeded to pursue a social work degree, for a clinical therapy program that I didn't fully understand was teaching therapy when I got accepted to it. Anyways, though, when I went to grad school, then like um I got a scholarship and was able to like go to a whatever. I went to U of M, which is like probably like in my opinion, it's a bougie social work program in the area. Is my
Right.
opinion
It's supposed
of
to be
it.
one of the best, right? If not the best, right?
Well, they brag
According
about
to
that a
paper.
lot. They do. They really think highly of themselves at U of M school social work. Uh, I think there have been really great teachers there, and I've learned a lot from some specific people, and I have issues with the institution. Um, but that being said, um, I ended up in this program, and then around that time, I had like, one of an infinite number of mental health crises, which is kind of like a lifelong pattern in my life. And so I started seeing a therapist like through U of M, which was my first opportunity to see somebody that wasn't like gonna take my Medicaid or whatever, like as an adult at least. And the person they paired me with was like this cisgender heterosexual white man who wore like a suit and had buzzed hair, and I was honestly kind of like afraid of him when I got paired with him. I was like, I don't know if I can like talk to you about vulnerable things. And then I found him to be like incredibly compassionate and skillful and to spend extra time with me, and like I felt very helped and cared for in a genuine way by him. And like my first reaction was like relief at having the help. And my second reaction was like, it's fucked up that I had to be in school to become a therapist after having 30 therapists myself to find somebody that actually was qualified and seemed to desire to actually be helpful to me. Sort of like the way I tricked my brain into being okay with becoming a therapist was to say, like, well, what if like the social justice work that we can frame around this kind of training that I'm receiving is like how to make this quality of care and support and this level of genuine actual investment accessible to people who actually have Medicaid and aren't attending school at U of M, because like that's sort of bullshit. But prior to that, my experience with mental health care as a recipient was a lot of like what I would consider like getting, arrested for being suicidal or whatever, like getting dragged out of my home by police in the middle of the night countless times, chemical restraints, having medications used against my will, including medications that I informed the staff I was going to have a medical reaction to. You know, I had 15 treatments of electroshock therapy. Like it was a very violent experience. And so for me, like decarcerating mental health care is like, I've never denied that like I struggled with mental health. Like I'm not delusional about that issue in my life, but that what I've experienced as a recipient of mental health care up until recent years has been basically a lot of violence and not anything that I would describe as helpful or even something that should have been helpful.
Wow, that's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep. Let me tell you something. I interviewed a person a couple weeks ago, and he was saying, and I would love to hear your perspective about this, how he came out of MDOC, out of prison,
Yeah.
and within weeks, or months, started realizing he needed some help mentally. He was dealing with was it substance use disorder, and he was like, "Hello, I need help."
Yeah.
And everybody was like, "You know what? You're not crazy enough."
Yeah.
And it wasn't until he did something, then it was like bingo.
Right. And it is true that like almost every mental health system, but especially the public mental health system here in Wayne County, like they have specific assessments that they're using to determine basically who gets care and how much care they get. And I was trained on them in a pretty extensive way because not only did I work in that system, but also my grad program was funded by Wayne County Community Mental Health System, which we now call DWIN, the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network, formerly the Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority. I don't really like the new name any better than the old name. Um, but like because I was funded, my grad program was funded through that, like I learned a lot about the specific assessments they use to basically determine, is your mental health severe enough to need treatment? Is it not severe enough to need treatment? Is it so severe that we're going to take you away from your entire life immediately and kidnap you and put you in a hospital against your will? You know?
Wow. Lance. Okay. And let me go on. I know we could spend all day on this topic, but abolishing non-consensual treatment.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? Let's unpack that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Did you want to start, Beth? Or I mean, I can.
Yeah.
That's
No,
like she's got a lot to. She's chewing on it, Lance. She's chewing on it, right? Yeah.
yeah. I
Abolishing
mean,
non-consensual treatment.
yeah, and I think this one goes hand in hand with decarcerating mental health care. When we think about incarceration, right? Decarceration is kind of the flip side of incarceration. I tend to think a lot about the idea of disposability, and we tend to
Wow.
um, label a group of people disposable as a result of them being inconvenient or not producing in a way that's recognized in a capitalist society. We tend to warehouse, if someone is mad, we'll warehouse them in a psychiatric hospital. If someone is poor or inconvenient, we'll criminalize them and warehouse them in a prison. And
Mm,
if someone is sick, they might get medicalized and then or pathologized
Yeah.
and incarcerated in and warehoused in like a hospital or a nursing home.
Yeah.
And so I think about that process of warehousing, and I think about the process of what it takes to control someone in those circumstances, and that's heavy restraints. You see that in nursing homes, you see that in psychiatric hospitals, you see that in prisons. It is coercive behaviors towards individuals, and it's basically trying to control people, rather not care for people. Nobody looks at a prison and honestly believes that this is a space that's intended to care for people. And I think that if anyone truly looked inside of a psychiatric hospital, they would be forced to confront the reality that this is not a place that people go to be cared for. This is a place that people go for the liability to be managed of their possibility of harming themselves. And that's a place that people go to in order to be brought back under control. And so one of the foundations of a psychiatric hospital tends to be non-consensual treatment in quotations. If you are looking at applying chemical restraints to a person, that person isn't consenting to being chemically restrained. If you are looking at telling someone you cannot get free until you show up to this group this many times, you cannot get free until you um, read this line of statements. You cannot get free until all of these things. You aren't treating that person. You're coercing their behavior.
right.
Um, and so when we ask ourselves, like in a world where, in a just world, what does helping people who are experiencing a mental health crisis look like? That looks like healing. That looks like coming together around that person. That looks like care. That doesn't look like strapping that person to a bed and injecting them. And so when we look at what needs to be abolished and the other side of that of what needs to be built, what we're looking at is a deeply consensual care-based model where we're not saying you need to do this in order for me to deem you acceptable. We are saying, what do you need in order to feel whole or in order to live a life that like makes sense to you? Or what are the criteria that you're basing your desire for the outcome off of, and how do we get you that?
Right, right. Well, if you're just joining us, I'm talking to two amazing organizers out of the Detroit Peer Respite, Lance and Beth. And we've got about 10 minutes or so. I know time has been flying by and everything, but this last topic, Lance and Beth, we is dear to, Michigan Liberation, especially with our Care Not Criminalization campaign, and that is taking cops out of crisis work. That's one of the things that we're looking at, and also lobbying to try to get that placed into some type of law, because what calling the police is not working all the time. I'll just leave it at that,
Yeah.
And let me get your perspective about taking cops out of crisis work. I mean, what are we talking about? We talking about calling on social workers, or I mean, I've heard some people say, "Oh, we've got cops that are specialized cops that are trained in this area."
So I think that our whole team is very staunchly against this kind of like messaging that gets promoted, because I think that when you think about like abolition as a framework and not just as a directive, it's not really about specifically police and only police. It's kind of about the entire mentality that led our culture to produce policing and believe that that's appropriate as a reaction to community trauma and unsafety. Um, and so when you think about policing as a framework, instead of just a job title, you realize that police come in many forms, including social workers, including therapists, including psychiatrists, including teachers, and, like youth workers, and a lot of people that we like to uplift as the solution. But like one of the ways that such people end up becoming basically functionally the same as cops in our communities, even against their own consent, is by the enforcement of such policies like either mandated reporting policy or like a duty to warn thing, where we essentially say that because you have a certain job or you have a certain professional license, that when you are worried that the people that you care for are either at risk themselves or maybe a risk to somebody else, they may do some harm, that we have laws in place to say you're forced to take forcible action to prevent the harm from happening. And a lot of what you see a lot of like my colleagues who are therapists that don't really organize that much doing is they're thinking about this in a very career-based way. They're like, this is my livelihood, I could lose my license, etc. And what that really does is it creates a rift between the therapist, who they're supposed to be that trusting, caring person, and their client, because now their priority isn't actually what's best for the client, it's what's best for themselves, frankly, and their employment and their career. And like in my own life as a client, like I found that when therapists were willing to trust me, when they were willing to spend extra time with me and let sessions run late, when they were willing to give me additional resources and spend the time and really slow down the process and not freak out about liability, those people didn't end up hospitalizing me against my wishes. And as a result, like those are the practitioners that I felt I could trust, who I spoke to openly, and who I was able to receive care from. Because when a practitioner does something that to you, like when they violate your own freedom on that level, especially considering, there's no discriminating who this happens to. It happens to parents and caregivers of other people. It happens to, sole breadwinners who then lose their homes. Right before starting Peer Respite, I befriended a 19-year-old who was in Havenwick with me, who's a trans girl. And after she was discharged from her stay, we stayed in correspondence, and she informed me that due to her hospitalization, she lost her job and was living in her car in a hostile community. I'm not sure why anyone feels that benefits her health as a 19-year-old transgender girl, but like the reason is because nobody wants to be responsible. Like nobody wants to say, I knew they were suicidal and I didn't stop them. And I think that whole concept of needing to stop people, like we have to get rid of it. Because like obviously nobody wants their friend to die by suicide. That's a terrible thing. But also like when we decide that because we don't want that to happen, we are going to be in charge of making sure it doesn't happen, we really devastate our relationships. We ruin people's lives. We ruin friendships. We ruin any chance at people actually being able to trust each other and work together towards healing, because now you've become my enemy. So I can't get care from you.
Wow. Wow. You know what? We have about 5 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes. And I want to spend the last part of this time. I'm going to put you two on the spot, but I know you guys are amazing. I want to talk, Lance and Beth, about mental health, but food for thought. A lot of people are going to want to reach out to you. They're going to see this episode and they're going to say, you know what, I want to ride or die with them, or I need some help, and I don't want to leave without people being able to reach out to you, and then also hearing some final words from you, especially those who are watching this who need help, and we know there's a lot of people out there. So I'll be quiet and let you guys talk to end it and drop the mic.
I think I'll jump in and just talk a little bit more about the peer respite model, why it's so important that we have something like this, and also what we're organizing specifically. So peer respite is the idea that when someone is going through a mental health crisis, they should have a safe place to go, and that place should be non-coercive. That place should be where they can go and be with someone who's supportive, or that they can have time to themselves, that their basic needs are being met, that they can reach that point of wellness and community they can carry with them. So we have our model is a 10 days up to a 10-day stay, where folks can check in. We work with one guest at a time. We are a very small operation. One guest at a time, staying in a host home. So the host home is a private residence that has dedicated space for the guest. 24-hour peer support worker support. So that would be folks coming through on 4-hour shifts, and being there with the person, or being nearby in case there's support needed. And
Wow, that's all I can say is wow. There's some people who needed you guys. I mean, I'm just being honest, and
yeah,
they need you now. I think that's amazing because you think about it, Lance and Beth. You see it on Facebook. I've seen it on Facebook. A lady I grew up with, her son was having an episode.
yeah,
What did they do? Call the police, right?
Yeah.
But the police arrested him. Guess what? Next day he was out.
yeah.
Had an even bigger episode.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, they had to shoot him, and it ended up killing him.
Oh my God.
This
Yeah.
was recent.
A couple years ago. Yeah, a couple years ago. And I apologize for going there, but I remember seeing his mom just constantly crying out through Facebook. And
Yeah,
I that's why I'm so adamant about this episode, because I want to get it out that
yeah,
you guys are doing this kind of work, because it's not for the faint. We know that. But it's
yeah,
needed. It's needed because people, I mean, even with Michigan Liberation, free grace movement we worked on, where the young lady was arrested
yeah,
for not doing her homework. This mother just needed help. She called the police, single mom, she wanted the child to have some tutoring. Remember during COVID, kids were just forced to go to virtual learning, and it was just crazy. So I commend the both of you, but I'm sorry, Lance, go ahead. I didn't get a chance to give you time for food for thought. I'm sorry, Beth. I didn't know if you were complete and everything. So, but well, okay, but yeah, but unfortunately, yeah, that story. But I mean, there's so many stories like that, y'all. It's to the point where it's like either jail, prison, or death,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, honestly, so I mean, I will say in terms of peer respite, we are actively recruiting right now. So currently we have 2 host homes, but our goal is to have 3 so they can rotate with each home. Like, for example, right now we have one person who needs a sober space and one person who's open to using a harm reduction approach. We'd like to have a third person in the mix because everybody has different comfort levels. And it's about making sure also that the host that is, hosting the guest is comfortable with the match, and that the guest feels comfortable where they're staying,
Right.
and allowing that some people need time off, people go out of town, people are just like, I need a break from having a program run in my home that I live in, which is fair. So we're recruiting a third home, and then we'll be done getting homes for right now. And then last I heard, we had about 50 volunteers that had expressed interest. And I think the hope was minimally 100, but potentially 150. So we have a good pool of volunteers that are going to be able to cycle in and out. So we are very much recruiting folks who are interested in participating in that. And recently what we kind of streamlined was our onboarding kind of welcoming process. So we are thinking of, well, not thinking of, but certain details are in flux, but currently we're having like a monthly sort of friend, like meet and greet sort of social space for people to just get to know us as people, and also for us to talk to them about our model and the values that are guiding our work, because it's very values-based work. So we want to make sure there's a shared alignment. And then if everybody feels good about that connection, they're really welcome to opt in a number of different ways. So like one being that we have monthly organizer meetings, which are open to anybody that wants to hold that ongoing responsibility of both program design, development, coordination, and also holding accountability. For folks that feel like that's a big lift or for whom that's not the right fit, we're also like definitely looking for peer support workers, which could be as, as frequently as multiple times a week, anywhere down to once a month for a 4-hour shift. And so folks that feel they might have interest in that, they don't need any experience. We're training people and it is peer led. So you don't have to have any special fancy credential other than we are specifically seeking people who have their own experience of struggle. That doesn't have to be anything particular or specific. So it's not like we need a diagnosis or you have to prove your history. But if you just come forward and you say, I'm holding these experiences and I want to support and volunteer, we are looking for that. We're looking to partner with food justice folks who can assist us with providing groceries and stuff like that for the guest in the home, because our intention is to ask nothing more than space from the host home. So to have all of the meals and necessities the person would need provided out of our own budget and resourcing. And then we are also collecting donations so that we can financially compensate folks either for the care work and or for hosting. And so like those are some of the ways that folks can kind of get involved right now.
Okay. And Lance and Beth, we'll make sure when we air this and everything that we'll give your information, social media, however you want to be contacted. If you want to give it out now, but we'll definitely make sure to put it in the caption because, I know sometimes people are like mesmerized or just kind of like taken back with just the message and everything. But how can people reach out to you? And then, like I said, we'll make sure we put it in the caption area when we promote this episode.
DetroitPeerRespite.org. There's a form that you can fill out to express interest in staying connected with us. That's a way that you can raise your hand and say, hey, I'm ready to become a peer support worker. It's also a way to get on our monthly newsletter, so you can keep up with all of the updates as we move forward and as we build.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lance and Beth. This is not going to be the last time that you come on here. In fact, we would love to. I would love to do a tour of one of the hosting homes and behind the scenes, because like I said, unfortunately, I blurted out that situation, but I would definitely, I wish, it is what it is, but I know there's so many people out there that could use your help and want to volunteer. So with that, I love you. I tell all my guests this, and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay.
Thank you so much for having us. And also for folks that maybe are needing support and don't feel in a place to volunteer right now, we do have a resource page on our website too. Most of those resources aren't abolitionist because we don't have the infrastructure in our community yet. But we share the information that we have about what folks have found useful on our webpage too.
All right. Thanks, Lance and Beth. Until next time, everybody, we are still talking about mental health awareness. And these two, I think, shut it down. We've got to do more. And you guys are definitely doing it. I mean, I never heard of that, but the work that you do, but I commend you. I'm so amazed at all the different partners and people that we meet and the work that's being done. And I commend you. Kudos. And I want to give you a hand clap and your flowers now, because you're doing the doggone thing. So until next time, everybody, thank you. Also, Beth and Lance, everybody has to say it. Respect the roots. All right. So remember to what? Respect the roots, the grassroots organizing. All right. Take care, y'all. Till next time. Y'all hold on.
Thank you.
Michigan Liberation Education Fund, C3, conducts grassroots organizing, leadership development, and civic engagement activities. Michigan Liberation C4 and Michigan Liberation Action Fund, IE, are sister organizations.